Welcome to Session 5 of On Your Mark, Get Set, Grow. The purpose of this small group series is to help participants grow in their understanding of Mark and the messages that Mark shared, to apply it to their lives on our own journey of faith, and to do it in a safe setting with others. The topic of this session is helping people learn from Mark about what it means to be a disciple. This is one of my favorite topics. When I first came to Chain of Lakes, we had a group that was putting together our purpose statement. Putting together this purpose statement was one of the most important things that we've ever done in the history of Chain of Lakes Church, because the purpose statement answers the question, why do you exist? As we were working on this as a group, I shared with the group my own personal passion to include the word disciple in the purpose statement. Some people pushed back. They shared that, folks who are outside of our church, they're not going to understand what it means to be a disciple. They thought, maybe being a disciple is like following Jim Jones. They would think that we at Chain of Lakes would want everybody to start drinking Kool-Aid. Well, I have nothing against Kool-Aid, though I haven't drunk it in a long time. But I do have a passion for helping people claim their identity as disciples and growing in their understanding of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. So ultimately, we did put that word disciple in the purpose statement of Chain of Lakes. We are called to be an authentic Christian community where strangers become friends, friends become disciples, disciples impact the world. So what can the Gospel of Mark teach us about being a disciple? Well, let's go back to the first chapter. Because as I've shared, the first chapter of Mark has a lot of these themes of Mark, and we can learn about what it means to be a disciple. Right away, Jesus was walking in the Sea of Galilee in an early part of Mark. It was a huge lake, the Sea of Galilee. He saw Simon, or Peter, and Andrew, Simon's brother. They were fishermen. Jesus said to them in the 17th verse, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." Two simple words capture what it means to be a disciple. Follow me. That's the call of Jesus. Follow me. Peter and Andrew did follow him. They became disciples. They traveled with Jesus for the rest of their adult life. Can you imagine what that would have been like? They saw the healings and teachings of Jesus. They saw Jesus encounter resistance and how Jesus responded to opposition. They saw how Jesus healed people. They were with Jesus in the upper room when Jesus celebrated the Passover and he started what you and I know of as the Lord's Supper. They knew that Jesus died on the cross and was raised from the dead. Can you imagine what an incredible adventure that these two had with Jesus? It not only changed their life, but the story of Jesus has changed the lives of more people on this planet than any person who has ever lived. Wow! Right after this story in Mark, Jesus saw James and John. It's in verses 18 through 20. They were in a boat, mending their nets. Immediately, remember how Mark uses that word a lot? Jesus called to them. The two left their father Zebedee and the hired men in the boat, and they followed him. One more story is in the next chapter of Mark, the second chapter. Jesus was again walking by the Sea of Galilee. He saw Levi in a tax booth. Levi was a representative of the state of Rome. He was not popular. Jesus said to Levi, "Follow me." And Levi got up from his place and followed Jesus. He became a disciple. Now, we can learn from these three stories and many others what it means to be a disciple. It means, of course, to follow Jesus. And it also means that we don't have to follow a church or a person, another person. We don't have to follow an ideology or a philosophy. We follow Jesus. Now, I can understand that it might be easy for us to have a who me? I can follow Jesus attitude. Or we might think, I can't be a disciple. That's only for people who pray a lot or go to worship all the time or give a lot of money to the church. I hardly believe in God. I'm not really even sure about Jesus. Could I be a disciple? Well, yes, you could. It's worth remembering that in these stories in Mark, the qualifications that Jesus asked of people to be a disciple. What were the qualifications? Was there a test? Was there a class a person had to take? Did Jesus say, go home and practice the disciplines of faith, prayer, worship, service, giving of our money? Did people have to recite from memory places in the Old Testament or the Shema from Deuteronomy 6? No. What we learn from Mark is what it means to be a disciple is to follow Jesus. Really, if we can breathe, then we're qualified to be a disciple. So let me be clear. I encourage people to take classes and develop faith practices, know scriptures from memory, know the history of our faith, but they don't qualify us to be a disciple. If we're human, we're qualified. When we were putting together the purpose statement of Chain of Lakes, some people confused being an apostle and being a disciple. And people didn't want to be a disciple because they thought, I could never be an apostle. And they were right. You and I aren't called to be apostles. There were 12 apostles already. These were the 12 who traveled with Jesus. We're not called to be like them. To be a disciple means we follow. Another question people have had about being a disciple is, if I'm a disciple, does that mean I have to be perfect? Well, not at all. Look at Mark, and look at how the disciples messed up all the time in Mark. It's comforting in a way to see how they messed up. There are all sorts of examples. One time they forgot to bring the bread that Jesus needed. Peter rebuked Jesus when Jesus told him he would go to the cross. They argued between each other about who was the greatest. They tried to stop others from healing. They prevented little children from coming to Jesus. James and John requested power to sit at the right hand of Jesus. Peter was insecure about whether he was truly following right. Judas betrayed him. Peter denied him. They slept while Jesus was praying in Gethsemane. The men weren't even at the cross in Mark when Jesus was killed. Messing up was part of being a disciple. So this statement, follow me and I will make you fish for people, is a significant phrase to remember. So when we follow Jesus, the foundation of our following is to help people. So we don't ultimately follow based on a system of religious laws or beliefs or a denomination. We follow to help people. We care for people. We love people. We'll even sacrifice for people. Let me be clear, religious laws are important. Religious beliefs are important. Denominations are important. But really what's most important is that we follow. Now, women can be disciples too. Some people in the church have taught that because Jesus only called men, that to be a leader in the church means you only can be a man. But Jesus didn't call just men to make a statement about gender. Jesus called men because this was the norm of the day. Jesus loved women and taught women. In fact, women followed Jesus. And the people who were at the cross, Mary Magdalene, Mary, and Salome, they were women. And these were the women who came to the tomb when the male disciples had deserted. We've seen what in this series what was most important to Jesus. The scribe asked Jesus what was most important, and Jesus responded, love God with all your heart and soul and mind, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. So what does it mean to follow? It means we love God and we love our neighbor as we love ourselves with all of our being. I have 4 principles in my life, and I pray over them every day. And one of the principles is really how I understand what it means to follow Jesus. It's love as Jesus loved. 4 words. Love as Jesus loved. If I can keep those 4 words in front of me, then I know I will be successful as a follower. One important part of Mark of being a follower is in the 8th chapter, the verses 34 to 38. Jesus said, if anyone to become my followers, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. What does that mean? Jesus went on to say, what will it profit a follower to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? To deny yourself. What does Jesus mean by that? Well, first of all, we have to understand to deny self in relationship to what the world values. They're much different. The world values money and power and prestige. So what happens is the risk we take if we have money, power, and prestige is we lose our life. So to deny ourselves is to deny the self as the world understands it. It doesn't mean we intentionally deny ourselves to follow, but it means as a result of our following, we will have times that we will deny ourself as the world understands self. At the core of our following is what I just said, to love with all of our being. When we focus on loving, then we will end up denying ourselves as the world understands it. The second part of this is take up your cross. What does that mean to take up your cross? Does that mean that we have to sacrifice to prove our devotion like Jesus died on the cross? No. Again, we have to understand means and ends. We can sacrifice and still not love. All of us might know of somebody who sacrifices really not in the spirit of love. They sacrifice so we might feel sorry for them, or they sacrifice to try to get attention. This is not what Jesus was saying, sacrifice for the sake of sacrifice. And leaders, quite frankly, at times in the church have used sacrifice as a way of manipulating others to do things. Jesus is never interested in manipulation. He's always interested in helping us love God and our neighbors as we love ourselves. So I think what Mark was saying is some days when we love, it feels like we're taking up a cross. Because the values of Jesus when we love are far different than the values of the world. And the values of following Jesus will put us into conflict with the world. And it feels like we're taking up a cross. So Jesus doesn't say try to intentionally take up the cross. He says love, and a consequence of that will feel like we're on a cross. The most important question in all of this, though, is this. Why would I decide to be a disciple or follower of Jesus? Well, Mark answered the question. Your life will be saved. You will discover life on this earth and when we pass away from the earth. This is not a works righteousness type of teaching, but when we put Jesus first, we will ultimately discover life. Not life as the world knows it, but the life of following. It's different than what the world values. It's not easy, but it's a life of fulfillment and satisfaction. It's a life of gratitude and wholeness and ultimately completion. Our lives are better because we follow, and the lives of people around us are better. I can't imagine a better way of being a complete person than following, being a disciple. We will grow. So, on your mark, get set, grow.